Atelier Yumia, the Alchemist of Memories in the Envisioned Land, is the latest installment from 𝐻 Studios, taking the Atelier series in bold new directions. Before we get into the details, I want you to know that this will be a spoiler-free review. Everything shown and spoken about will be along the lines of what you've seen from trailers and the demo. However, I will briefly touch on character dynamics, so if you consider that a spoiler, you are warned. The most significant shift in Atelier Yumia is its take on the open world format, doing away with the usual wide linear structure and embracing vast regions for players to explore at their own pace. Filled with resources you'll need for alchemy, hidden secrets, puzzles, diverse biomes, and more. This formula offers a fresh sense of freedom that I couldn't be happier about. Personally, I've always wanted an open world fantasy anime style RPG, something similar to Genshin Impact, but without all the horrendous gacha elements. You would think that there would be a lot of these in the market, but no. Even games with larger maps like Tales of Arise or Star Ocean the Divine Force ultimately lack any depth in their worlds and don't overtly reward any exploration. You can run around the field, sure, but there is still a set path you must follow. Atelier Yumia, however, is the exact sort of open world game I've been itching for. The world is massive. It has multiple different regions to traverse, each with their own unique visual flair, landmarks, enemy types, and fast travel points to activate. Majority of my playthrough was spent just wandering the lands, grabbing materials, and discovering as many new and hidden areas as I possibly could. The game heavily rewards your exploration. Chances are no matter where you're going, you'll find something of value. That said, I do want to note that this game does that thing a lot of RPGs do, where there's a bunch of treasure chests in the world, but a lot have very superfluous items in them. Some of these chests literally just have keys to open other chests, and that just seems a little silly. Alchemy remains at the heart of the series, playing a major role not just in the narrative, but how you craft and use various items throughout your playthrough. Atelier Yumia introduces a revamped synthesis system that honestly I found a bit overwhelming. There are a lot, and I mean a lot, of materials you can gather. Those materials can be used to synthesize other materials, all of which have their own effects and levels of quality that will vary for many factors. The mechanic itself is very accessible and rewarding, giving the player a lot of freedom to customize and experiment as they see fit. There is no way to fail at synthesizing, but depending on your resources, you may end up with a less than preferred outcome. For those of you like myself who don't want to go through hundreds of items to determine the best result, there is an automatic synthesizing option. You can choose to automatically use items that would boost the quality of the thing you're creating, boost the effect the item would have, or use the bare minimum of resources just to get the item made and be on your way. I use that one a lot for side quests. Very convenient, and I don't have to worry about accidentally using something that was hard to find. This is all without mentioning the building you can do as well. Thanks to alchemy, you can even create entire bases for your party. Make a personalized atelier, fill them with a ton of stuff or very little. It's entirely up to the player and their imagination. You can create things that will aid in your gameplay, such as desks necessary to learn new recipes for synthesizing, a changing room to alter characters' appearances, or an item box that stores the items you have too many of. And that's just scratching the surface. The crafting plays a huge part of this game, and I heavily advise you give it as much attention as you can. While I didn't do much with the systems myself, they're here for the players to express their individuality, and that adds a layer of immersion. It's both engaging and intuitive, albeit somewhat overwhelming. The combat has received a dynamic overhaul, creating a seamless blend of turn-based mechanics with real-time action. Admittedly, I'm not well versed in this field when it comes to older Atelier games, but when comparing it to what I have played of 𝐼𝐼𝐧𝐝, this one makes me feel a bit more engaged. While the battles are in real time, your attacks all have a set amount of time they can be performed consecutively, as well as their own cooldowns. You can craft equipment that will reduce cooldown speed, but ultimately you will more often than not have to plan your attacks accordingly. There is also Perfect Guard and Perfect Evade that grants its own benefits outside of just reducing damage. There are items you can use in combat, serving as their own additional weapons, which have their own amount of stocks and cooldown. These weapons can be used throughout the entire playthrough, so you don't have to worry about them being gone after a single use. They can be equipped to any character, and they really help elevate the combat. With multiple equipped items, you can change between them the same way you would your regular skills, making every action you perform be in service of another. Not to mention there are field shifts as well, a front and back, where your skills actually change depending on the distance you're in. Some characters actually have superior skills depending on this position as well. It is all very, very engaging, but it isn't exactly complex. Some will no doubt argue that the combat lacks depth, but I don't think a lack of intricacy equals a lack of enjoyment. The harder enemies in the game, both bosses and regular, will still require strategy, meter management, and elemental awareness. With all that said, I do want to mention an issue I have with the combat, and that is how in most instances there will be a lot of effects on screen. Your characters don't actually stagger when they're getting hit, so there were many times where I was losing health and had no clue I was even being attacked due to all the effects happening at once. There are audio and visual cues that indicate when an enemy is about to attack the player specifically, but they can still be hard to notice when everything else is going on. The characters and story are something I won't get into too much as to avoid spoilers, and it's all for the best that you experience it yourself. Storytelling and character interactions are always a major strength of RPGs, and I'm happy to report that this game is no exception. The story is very personal but equally profound, exploring themes of redemption while dealing with societal perceptions and prejudice. Overall, the narrative has what I would say a perfect blend between comedic, wholesome, and lighthearted elements, along with deeper themes and mature tones. It's not just tonal whiplash either, it's all balanced as well as it should be. There will be times where you may leave a somber story scene and then find yourself in a more joyous side story, and vice versa, but these often happen due to the way in which the player progresses through the game, not a fault of the game's narrative structure itself. Shifting tones abruptly can be avoided by playing through the story in a streamlined sense, but I think that would be the more boring option. As for characters, without giving too much away, they're great. It's not often where an RPG has a full cast of characters for me to like. Even in my favorite game of all time, Tales of the Abyss, there's usually one party member that I just don't like. That's not the case here, as every member has their own quirks and charm to them, with side quests that delve more into their backstories, outlook on life, likes, dislikes, and subtle personality traits, and more. All without anyone being egregiously obnoxious or unwanted. Side note, Linnea is the most precious creature ever, and we need to protect her at all costs. I have to say, Gus knocked it out of the park with this cast. I can't really speak on them in comparison to other Atelier games, but when next to my favorite RPGs, this is some of the best cast out there. Atelier Yumia is a bold but beautifully realized evolution of the series. The rich open world, methodical crafting system, strategic yet flashy combat, engaging narrative, and enthralling characters all make for a game that doesn't just aim to meet expectations, but blow them away. This is an unforgettable experience that I wholeheartedly encourage everyone to give a try. At the end of my Fairy Tail 2 review, I gave a number grade, and while I don't strongly abide by that sort of system, if I had to give one for Atelier Yumia, it's easily a 9 out of 10. This wasn't just a great time, it's easily shot up on my list of favorite RPGs of all time. Thank you all for watching that review. As always, before I close out, I want to give a huge thanks and shout out to my members. Xenogen, Sosa, Jack, appreciate you guys very much. Anyone that's not a member yet, please consider supporting the channel and hitting that join button. Go ahead, see if any of those perks interest you. Another special thanks to 𝐾𝐿𝐢𝐚 for providing me a review copy of this game. Don't forget to like and subscribe on your way out, and yeah, I'll catch you all whenever.